watching ENTV.
Hey everyone, we had some technical issues filming today's intro for Hard Hitters, but just to give you guys an explanation of what this episode is about, we filmed a Hard Hitters award show, not your typical awards. We're not giving out MVP, we're not giving out Offensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. We're doing our version of awards, and starting off, we're doing Biggest Fraud that is being given to the Vikings. So without further ado, Kevin, take it away.
Well, here come the Vikings. First-year head coach Kevin O'Connell. They still got a good team around him, and they started winning some games, improving over last season. But they started winning too close. All the games were won by one score. They had some crazy finishes, including that Week 10 Bills game where they won in overtime by 3 points in whatever fashion they won. And in Week 11, they play the Cowboys. They get destroyed. Week 17, they play the Packers. They get destroyed. They still have a negative point differential.
Mainly, if you stop Justin Jefferson, you stop the entire offense. So they have to figure out a way to work others into that offense and going into the future. And yeah, they have to not win so many close games, try and blow teams out, and maybe they'll get better next year.
Yeah, as a Packers fan, it makes me very, very satisfied to give this award to the Vikings. I really enjoyed that Week 17 matchup, and I really enjoyed their loss to the Giants in the playoffs. So I think they are most worthy of the Biggest Fraud award. Moving on, our next award is the worst play. And the worst play has been given to a tie between the Zeke at center last play of the year for the Cowboys and the Jacoby Myers lateral, in which he just gave the ball back to the Raiders and they scored as time expired instead of letting the game go to overtime. So what are your thoughts on these two plays?
Yeah, I mean, the Jacoby Myers play is one of the biggest what are you doings I've ever seen in professional sports. That is more deserving of worst play because it's, that lost them the game and a playoff spot. The Cowboys were just doing what they could. But the thing that makes the Cowboys play worse is that they dialed it up 2 times in a row.
Moving on to our next award, the biggest downfall. We have to give it to the Rams. Coming off their Super Bowl to just having a flat-out terrible season. Of course, they were riddled with injuries, but it just wasn't the same Rams team that we saw from the year prior. So what do you guys got here?
Huge disappointment after one of their best seasons last season, and gotta see what the Rams can do moving forward.
Yeah, as a Bengals fan, I'm actually kind of mad at the Rams. It's like you couldn't look good for at least one more season to make it look like you deserved that Super Bowl. It still hurts to lose that game to the Rams, but the bird above me that decided to poop on my shirt actually summarized the Rams perfectly. He said what needed to be said. That's all that can be said about their season is you can blame it on injuries, you can blame it on Stafford, you can blame it on coaching, you can blame it on whatever you want. But I've never seen a reigning Super Bowl champ come out and look as horrible as the Rams did throughout this season.
Yeah, also want to give a special mention to the Jets and the Titans here. The Titans and the Jets both starting out the season in tremendous fashion and then just completely forgetting how to play football in the second half of the season and missing the playoffs. So we're going to throw them in as honorable mentions for this award as well. But moving on to Demoted to USFL, we are in agreement that the Texans should be the team demoted to the USFL for their performance this season. Comments on that?
Back-to-back years, they had less than 5 wins. Yeah, back-to-back years also where they have one-and-done head coaches. Something is definitely very wrong in that city.
Yeah, you got to say 2 things about the Texans. That's one, they can't win games. They're not a good team, so they deserve to be in the USFL. But then 2, you can't even tank right. You're supposed to be getting the number 1 overall pick. That's what this whole season is for, is to get the number 1 overall pick, and you can't even do that right.
And just want to give a special mention, honorable mention, to Zach Wilson for this award, being demoted to the USFL. Sean, our Jets fan, you have anything you want to say about Mr. Zach Wilson?
Yeah, he was benched twice throughout the season, and the second time was to Chris Strebler. I think that's all that needs to be said. He doesn't deserve to be in the NFL. He's just terrible. I was once a big Zach Wilson supporter, but no longer.
All right, so we present to you now the BK Play of the Year Award. And that award is going to none other than the Houston Texans and Lovie Smith for going for 2 at the end of their Week 18 matchup that ended up losing them the number 1 overall pick. What do you guys have to say about this play?
Well, big shout out to the Houston Texans. This is definitely a play that is deserving of the most infamous song of the 2022 NFL season, which is the Whopper song or the Chicken song or any other song that has been produced by Burger King in their numerous commercials this year. The commercial, like your team does something that hurts your feelings or the other team does something that completely drains you, then the game cuts away and immediately you hear that song coming to your face.
The whole point of this season was to get your QB of the future at number 1 overall, and now there's a chance, especially that your division rival, the Colts, who have great draft capital, could jump you with the trade with the Bears, who you just handed the number 1 overall pick to. Your division rival could jump you and get the quarterback you wanted, all because you decided to go for 2 when you could have just lost the game, tied the game, whatever you wanted to do. But instead you went for the win, and now you don't have the number 1 overall pick. Lovie Smith definitely knew he was getting fired after that game and just told the Texans organization, well, so long, your number 1 overall pick, you're firing me. This is my parting gift to you. But yeah, if you're a Texans fan and you're just like, yes, this is the number 1 overall pick, it's happening, and then you watch your team win the last game of the season to lose the number 1 overall pick, and then immediately you hear a guy scream Whopper in your face on the television, you're not going to be doing so great. So that's why this award is presented to that team.
Next up, our next award is Worst Game of the Year, and this game goes to none other, of course, a Thursday Night Football matchup, the Colts versus Broncos, where I think neither team scored a touchdown in this game, and it went to overtime. So what are your guys' thoughts on this game? I think we did a recap on this game throughout the year, but what are your thoughts on it being worst game?
Yeah, so for some context for this game, where I was staying during the hurricane, we had no power, no cell service, no Wi-Fi, no anything. I got power back about an hour before this game was on. And I was like, yes, I've been living in the dark and without power for the last week. I haven't been able to text people, I haven't been able to call people. We got football on in an hour, I finally have my power back. This is going to be a great way to kind of try to get back to normal. And then I was treated to 4 hours of some of the worst football I've ever seen played. I couldn't decide who was worse, Matt Ryan or Russell Wilson. I couldn't decide which head coach was more incompetent. It was just a horrible, horrible game. And, some people are like, oh yeah, defensive slugfests can be fun. Yeah, that one wasn't. That was just horrible. It wasn't a defensive slugfest. It was 2 offenses not knowing how to play football. It was just horrible to watch. It is definitely far and away the worst game of the year, and I will be very happy if I never have to think of it again after speaking on it just now.
All right, so our next award is Tank Bowl Champion, and to accept this award, we are going to bring on Packy, as we are giving this award to him and his Chicago Bears.
What can I say? My Chicago Bears. Yeah, we ended the year very badly, but hey, I had to give a special shout out to Lovie Smith. I know we fired you, but hey, you kept us in your heart and you gave us that number 1 overall pick, and I really appreciate it. Not only that, we have the most cap space going into the offseason, and we have a couple good rookies that show some promise, plus the number 1 overall pick like I mentioned. So while we had a really bad season, I think the future is looking quite bright for us, especially with Justin Fields as our quarterback.
All right, so our next award is the biggest upset of the year, and I know we've mentioned them quite a bit here recently, but the Colts beating the Chiefs has to be our upset of the year. Granted, it was a little earlier in the season, so we didn't really think it was that crazy of a win, but with where these teams are at now in the end of the year, Chiefs are playing in the Super Bowl, and the Colts are picking number 4 overall, this has to be upset of the year.
There's always that one game where a team loses some team that they're not supposed to lose to, and this year Chiefs lost to the Colts. We didn't think anything of it at first. We thought the Colts were still a good team. It turns out that they completely nosedived after that game, and we now look back at that game and wonder, how in the world did that happen? It just goes to show you that any team can beat any team on any given day.
Yeah, looking back at the season now, this game makes no sense. The Chiefs lost a total of 3 games this year. 1 to the Bills, makes sense. 1 to the Bengals, makes sense. And then the Colts. There's just a very big divide there between those first 2 and then that last one.
All right, next up, we have what I think is going to be Carson's favorite award. The best hard hitters team. As you know, we all have our favorite teams: Packers, Dolphins, Jets, Bengals. So the best hard hitters team making the AFC Championship, just falling a little short. This award is given to Carson. Carson, what do you have to say?
It's a good consultation prize for this Lombardi Trophy. There goes Lombardi Trophy, MVP, Hard Hitters, Best Team Award. Those are the top 3 awards that you can get as an NFL team. This year was great because it just proved that last year wasn't a fluke. A lot of people last year, after the Bengals were in the Super Bowl, they were like, that was a fluke run. That's not going to happen again. They played the worst number 1 seed in history, blah, 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 blah. All this talk of the offseason was how the Ravens were still going to win the division, how the Browns were still going to win the division. Like, no one believed in the Bengals, except for Bengals fans, after the Super Bowl. It was called a complete fluke. And then we came out here and we won more games than we did last year. And while we did make it back to the Super Bowl, we're 1 missed call, we're 1 made field goal, we're 1 non-intentional grounding by Joe Burrow away from probably being in the Super Bowl again. I'm very proud of this team for how far they've come. I sat through the Andy Dalton years where we couldn't win a playoff game for nothing, and now I'm sitting through the Joe Burrow years where we're in back-to-back AFC Championship games. We're this close to being in back-to-back Super Bowls, so it feels good to have the tides kind of change a little bit, and I'm very excited to see what this team does next year.
All right, now on to our final award, which needs little introduction. Worst off-season move, Broncos country, let's ride. Everything the Broncos did this offseason was just terrible and just put together a terrible recipe that they had an awful chef cooking. And what do you guys have to say about Broncos country?
They hired head coach Nathaniel Hackett for this. We thought they were going to do that to bring in Aaron Rodgers, but they got Wilson instead. No biggie. Russell Wilson, he's a proven winner. They can win some games. But then week 1, they played the Seattle Seahawks, Broncos country, left wide. And they barely won their week 2, week 3 games. And then that Colts game we realized, oh no, this team ain't good.
But the Russ thing looks worse and worse every day because they basically mortgaged their future to get Russell Wilson and then also paid him $245 million. And he looked like one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL.
Everything the Broncos did this year was awful. Hackett was definitely the worst coach in the NFL this year. Russ was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL this year. They traded so much to get him. They have no future in terms of draft capital. They would have had a top 10 pick, but of course Seattle has that pick now. They hired Sean Payton, so we'll see how that affects it. But without draft capital, there's not much they can do to build around a team. And I feel bad, especially for their defense, because they did have a really good defense this year, but the offense let them down game after game after game.
All right, thank you everybody for tuning in to the Hard Hitters Awards. Be sure to tune in next week where we're going to give our Super Bowl prediction. So thanks for watching, and tune in next week for our Super Bowl prediction.